Nigerian ambassador to Burundi as we assess the key takeaways from the summit for Nigeria and the world's leading economies. Ambassador, good evening to you, sir. Thank you so much for joining us on Politics Tonight. Thank you.
A very good evening to you, Jumoke. It's my pleasure being on your studio once again.
Thank you very much. You know, the G20 Summit meeting was overshadowed by events that are further increasing divisions among the world's leading and emerging economies. You talk about Russia-Ukraine war, which according to reporting TED is its 1,000th day. You also look at the escalating conflict in the Middle East and the election to a second term of President Donald Trump, whose America First approach to foreign policy includes threats to impose tariffs on imports. For you, how significant is the theme of this year's summit?
Oh, thank you very much, Jumoke. First, there is always a need for people that are listening to understand what the G20 Summit is all about and why it was important that Nigeria is duly represented at that level. And clearly for us, it's important to understand that the G20 is a group of 19 top world economies. 19 top world economies and the European Union. And these 19 top world economies account for 85% of global GDP. They also account for about 75% of international trade. And they also account for 2/3 of the population of the world. So it's important that, for us as a country, that our president is actually very visible in this kind of, meetings. And what they've done this year, President Lula of Brazil hosted the meeting this year. Last year, I think it was in India. Next year, South Africa is going to be hosting the G20. This year, what was instructive is that there is already an admittance of the African Union, making it the 21 member states that is admitted as permanent member of the G20, for Africa to be represented at that level. That actually underscores the importance of, of the rising African profile to be represented at the level where, most decision makers come through yearly to make decisions. And clearly, this year it was important for us because the president endorsed the Global Alliance for the fight against, hunger and poverty. This is also one of the SDGs. In fact, the SDG number 1 and SDG number 2 talked about, eradication of hunger as well as that of poverty. So, and this year's summit, clearly, that endorsement, it was President Lula that championed this global alliance against hunger and poverty. And this year, there were also conversations around the climate change and sustainability issues, how we can have energy transition. In Nigeria, we are struggling to see how we can begin to make our energy level, sustainable, how we can, find a way to begin to convert from the regular use of gas and petroleum products to CNG and some of these issues. This year's summit also talked about global governance reforms. And what was the issue here? The president tried to make a very important case for Nigeria and Africa to become a permanent member of the United Nations Security Council. At least this issue has been on and conversation around this has been going on for a while. And this kind of meeting, the top 19 world economies, is where you find leaders that can actually make a case for, for Africa and for voices of the other countries that needs to be heard to be elevated. And of course, this was one of the issues. And the issue again, another issue this year, like you talked about, was trying to find a way to de-escalate the geopolitical tension that is going on. You talked about the 1,000th day of the Russia-Ukraine war. There's also a lot of conversation in this year's summit around the Israeli-Hamas war, as well as the rising tensions between the U.S. and China as well. So these conversations were very important, and for us as Africans, for us as Nigeria, it was important that the president continues to make a case for representation, continues to make a case for inclusivity, continues to make a case for, the voices of Africans and the African continent to be heard at a much more elevated platform. And I think it was a very good meeting for Nigeria. And we look forward to, the outcome, so that going forward, we'll need to begin to see conversations around these reforms, around, the climate change issues, around the global alliance against hunger and poverty, as well as along admitting Nigeria and other African representations as at the United Nations Security Council, including even Nigeria becoming a member of the G20, because South Africa is there. So I see no reason why Nigeria cannot also become a member of the G20, going forward. But it was a good meeting.
Absolutely, Ambassador. I wanted us to have a global perspective to that conversation before we bring it back home. But let's continue from where you stopped. So, does President Tinubu's participation underscore the global recognition of Nigeria as Africa's largest economy and a critical voice in shaping global policies, considering that he was invited personally by Brazil's president?
Yes, it's without a doubt. What it means is that this is a recognition of the fact that Nigeria is a voice. Nigeria is the largest economy within the African continent. Nigeria is a leader of the continent. So usually G20 meetings are, they hold between these top leaders, 19 plus the European Union. Now African Union will now have a permanent representation in that meeting. But of course, they also go ahead to invite other countries' presidents, which is the case for our president. They invite other participating countries to also come. So this is a recognition of the body, this is a recognition of Nigeria and our president as a leader within the continent. And I believe that that allows us, for our voice to be heard at that level. And I think that this underscores the recognition of Nigeria and its growing influence, at the world level. And clearly, there's no gainsaying the fact that it was a good outing for our president. And the team that accompanied him also talks about what the interests were, because we have the Minister of Foreign Affairs, without a doubt. We also have the Minister for Livestock Development. We have the Minister for Culture, and also we have the Minister for State for Agriculture. So that means that Nigeria, is out there making a case for cultural integration, making a case for food security and agricultural sustainability, and also making a case for climate change, and also making a case for, improved recognition of the fact that this is a huge continent. I mean, if you listen to the president while speaking, with his endorsement of the Global Alliance for against hunger, you had him talking about the kind of population we have, and the fact that about 70% of this population is under the age of 30. And therefore, there has to be a concise effort. There has to be a clear plan, to help this population with food security, to help this population do everything possible to have access to cheap financing. And all of these are the things I believe that will be germane going forward. And he also afforded the president opportunity to also discuss the reforms that are happening at the local level, so that the international community, the leaders of the world, will also be abreast of what is going on at the local level. So I think he underscores that point, that Nigeria's voice, that the president is also recognized as a global leader, and that's obviously what this is about.
Right. I think we have enough time to look at these key takeaways one after another, because at the summit, Mr. President provided an opportunity to talk to the world about his ongoing economic reforms, acknowledged that the reforms had weakened Nigeria's purchasing power. But he has also assured that his administration would continue to provide social safety nets to cushion the unintended consequences. So your overall assessment of the president's outing and what it means for Nigeria in broader perspective.
Okay, I didn't hear your initial question.
Ambassador, did you get that question?
Yes. No, I didn't get the question. Please, can you come again, please?
All right. So I said that I wanted us to take the major key takeaways one after another, because we have enough time. At the meeting, at the summit rather, Mr. President provided an opportunity to talk to the world about his ongoing economic reforms. He also acknowledged that the reforms had weakened Nigeria's purchasing power. But he was also assured that his administration would continue to provide social safety nets to cushion the unintended consequences, as he put it. So overall, what's your overall assessment of the president's outing and what it means for Nigeria? I want you to, let's look at a broader perspective now.
You know, it's always meetings at this level at the G20 allows every participating president or every leader to talk about what they are doing at that level, and also seek for broader understanding of the, for the global community to understand what you're doing at the domestic level, and also ask for support and seek for partnership. Part of the things that happen in this kind of meeting is that it also affords you the opportunity to also, on the sidelines of that engagement, also meet at a bilateral level with other leaders of the top, of the top economies of the world. So I think that the president clearly made the case, trying to ask for support and explaining to the G20 what our local reforms are, and of course, an acknowledgement of the unintended consequences. Of course, our purchasing power is weakened, by virtue of the reform of the foreign exchange. We also have a lot of issues that pertains to hunger. There's also a lot of issues that has to do with inflation. The removal of subsidy also has brought about, hunger and quite a lot of increments in the prices of goods and commodities. But of course, these are real issues. And of course, the president's outing is there highlighting these challenges and then seeking for support from the global community. And that is what the meeting is about. So, from a broader perspective, I thought it was a good outing. The president clearly talked about the domestic policies and also projected Nigeria as a leader within the continent. And the fact that Nigeria has gotten to a level where we believe we can represent the continent and we can have a permanent seat at the table, especially at the United Nations Security Council. And that point has been made over and over again. And this point has been consistent in all of the diplomatic shuttle that the president has engaged in over the last a year and a half, of this administration. He has made that point very clearly that the world needs to recognize that Nigeria has come of age, and that leadership position within the continent should be made available for us so that we can actually be there representing the interest of Africa and that of the local economy here. So I think it was a very good outing, in my opinion, and I think that all of this engagement is as a result of the fact that the president is interested in fostering Nigeria's, in promoting, every issue that has to do with Nigeria at the international arena. So I congratulate the president for this outing, but we also sit back and then begin to get to the nitty-gritty and finding a way to ensure that some of these dividends are brought to bear. Issues relating to energy transition. I talked about the fact that we need to move from the, from what we have now, to the clean energy. We have to find a way to transition from ensuring that, we are not dependent on just the power that comes from hydro. What exactly do Nigeria need to do to ensure that we are taking maximum advantage of things like solar and wind energy, some of the clean energy options that are available today. So these issues are there. And of course, the climate change issue as well. The COP29 just ended a few weeks ago, and there were lots of agitations from developing nations as regards, how they can be compensated with respect to the nature of activities that are going on. Some of these activities that are coming from the developed nations, that are bringing adverse effect to the developing nations. So all of this conversation are the things that the president brought to bear, and we sit back and then we want to be able to see that the outcome of this is also very beneficial for Nigeria in the long run. Another meeting is coming up sometime next year, I think in South Africa, and another one in America. So this engagement allows us continued participation at that global stage. And then, of course, I believe that this is where Nigeria should be playing at this particular point.
To add to that, Ambassador, there were conversations around reform of global governance institutions, energy transitions, and sustainable development. But let's take institution, for example. Based on empirical evidence, do you think the current administration is working assiduously to erect and restore our falling institutions of government, especially in the area of fighting corruption?
Well, the conversation at this point was actually revamping and reforming the global institutions, issues relating to the United Nations and how the membership of, certain committees and especially the Security Council is constituted. I mean, Africa is, we have over 1 billion people in this continent. This is one of the most resourced continents. In fact, the most resourced continent on the face of the earth. How come Africa does not have a representation at the United Nations Security Council? We have quite a lot of emerging economies and developing economies within this space. So there's a need, and the conversation was around ensuring that these global organizations or agencies are reformed in such a way that there is inclusivity. We need to hear our voice more. Africa's voice has to be elevated. So when we want to talk about issues of climate change, we feel it the most. Activities of developed nations has a way of negatively impacting the continent. We find out that most of our youths are always traveling. There are migration issues that we have to deal with. So that's the constitution of the United Nations Security Council without a representation from the African continent needs reform, and that is the point that is being made. Now, talk about corruption, for example. Of course, issues related to corruption, even at the local level, we will continue to talk about. There is never an end to it. Most of our engagements, you can see what is going on, the reforms that are going on within our own corruption-fighting institution like the ICPC and the EFCC. But this issue, or the point discussed at this level, at this G20 meeting, is talking about inclusivity. It's talking about hearing, getting to hear the voices of other countries that do not have the platform to express themselves. And that was what, the president have consistently tried to advocate for this inclusivity and trying to advocate that Africa must have a space at that level, and also making a case for even Nigeria to hold that position for Africa. So I think that is a step in the right direction, and that's the constitution of the reform. Even at the G20 level, for example, I see no reason why Nigeria being the largest economy. Remember, the membership of the G20, the 19 countries alongside with the European Union, account for 85% of the global GDP. What does that mean? It means basically that these are the leaders. So just 19 countries account for 85% of the global GDP. So Nigeria is not even part of it yet. So I believe that Nigeria, being the largest economy in Africa, should also make a case to become a member of G20. And at that level, we will have more opportunities to cooperate, both at bilateral level and at multilateral level. And I believe that these are all possible. So the reform and the case, for improved reform of these global agencies and institutions is apt. And this is not the first time the president is talking about it. And he's been very consistent. And I believe that, somewhere down the line, we will make progress and we will begin to see UN reform themselves and also begin to ensure that there is inclusivity, that some of these developing nations, and indeed Africa, will have a seat at the United Nations Security Council. So
that will lead me to my next question, because another consideration at the summit this year was social inclusion and the fight against hunger and poverty. How laudable is the creation of the Global Alliance Against Hunger and Poverty? Because according to reports, there is a task force dedicated to gathering funds and knowledge towards implementation of public policies needed to reduce global hunger and poverty. What kind of message does this send to vulnerable populations across the globe?
This is a very important element of this summit. And without a doubt, even from the local end here in Nigeria, we know that there's hunger in the land, without a doubt. And it's not just a Nigeria issue. Even when you go to most sub-Saharan African countries, you find out that it's the same thing everywhere. And you know that one of the SDGs, actually SDG number 1 and SDG number 2 is talking about hunger and poverty. Eradication of hunger, eradication of eradication of poverty, and zero hunger. So these are issues that require the leading economies of the world to pay attention to. The task force that has been set up is set up in such a way that they are to mobilize funding and ensure implementation of this alliance. And it's a wonderful initiative from President Lula. And Nigeria endorsement of it is basically to say that we are also in need of whatever the outcome of that alliance will be, because we don't live in isolation. There is hunger in the land, and we must always find a way to begin to look at how we can appropriate some of the benefits that will come from this alliance to come to the local economy. We've got arable lands here. We need assistance with respect to, our agricultural policies and how we can support ourselves with local production. We also need to find a way to connect infrastructures from our farms to, to our industries. We need to ensure that we are not importing basic food that we can eat in the country. That local production, by way of ensuring food security, is extremely very, very important for us as a nation. So that alliance is there. Nigeria has endorsed it, and I'm quite confident that we will do everything possible to get whatever benefits that the alliance will bring forth for the country. And the vulnerable population of the world are also looking forward to what will come to them, because there is no gainsaying the fact that the people are hungry. And if we have this as one of the sustainable development goals, it is not just about talk. Time has come for these leading economies to begin to do all they can and everything within their rights, to ensure that, assistance is given in that line to be able to fight against poverty and hunger. And this is, I believe that the vulnerable population of the country will receive this news positively, and so is Nigeria as well.
Ambassador, let's take a break, and when we come back, we'll continue this conversation. Please stay with us, everyone.
Every weekday on Business Nigeria, we uncover the secrets of the financial world.
We analyze the stock market, shares, bonds, and the thrilling world of cryptocurrency.
Facts matter. Our team dives deep to separate fact from popular opinion.
We simplify complex government policies as it impacts your everyday life, helping you navigate the ever-changing financial landscape.
Watch Business Nigeria every weekday at 2 p.m. only on TVC News. First with breaking news.
There is always more to a story than the screaming headline. The part of a story that is not told casts a shadow. It's like the part of an object that is not reached by light. On TVC News, I'm able to explore breaking news.
Sometimes it's the story that calls. At other times, the people just want to be heard.
School, I need students, but I need teachers.
Can't continue like this.
Their voices re-echoing through time itself.
We haven't done anything.
If the tide is high, everybody run for safety.
Their tears leave a sweet, sour taste for all their demands. A familiar call beckoning for change. In our world, no one expects a disaster to happen. But when it does, we'll be there to x-ray all sides, from the east to the west, north and south. Community Forum will examine the oddities and challenges to economic development, as well as issues yearning for government intervention. Watch fresh episodes of Community Forum on Sundays by 9:30 p.m. only on TVC News.
Welcome back to Politics Tonight, everyone. Thank you so much for staying with us. I've been speaking with Ambassador Elijah Onyeagba. He's the former Nigerian ambassador to Burundi, as we discuss key takeaways from G20 Summit in Brazil. Ambassador, thank you so much for staying with us on the program. Now, we're still talking about zero hunger and poverty eradication. I would like us to stay on how Nigeria can tap from Brazil's extensive experience and international recognition, reduction of poverty and inequality through programs. And this is particularly because here in Nigeria, we do not have challenges with coming up with policies, but execution of these policies. Bolsa Familia, for example, was a conditional cash transfer program, which benefits more than 55 billion people in the country. But when it comes to income transfers, we're still struggling as a nation. In reaching the hard to reach, how can Nigeria tap from these experiences?
Well, this is the reason for encouraging participation at this level, because that forum allows for idea sharing. It allows for, cooperation at that level. It allows you to hold not just at the multilateral level, but also to have bilateral conversations as to how we can benefit from from the expertise that we find out there. Yes, implementation is always an issue, but still, that doesn't mean that we will not continue to look for assistance around the world. You know, this meeting actually ended with commitments for for advanced, equitable global policies and how the world can, begin to put together policies that will benefit, the people that are at the lower end of the society. And that's why this alliance has become extremely very important. And, the essence of this also is to tap into the expertise of those that have achieved successes in these areas. And if there is, there is copyright, but there's also right to copy. If you have also seen where things have been done extremely very well, you can actually copy and emulate those kind of policies where they have been implemented without issues. So I believe that Nigeria is in a position, having participated in this, to engage world leaders, to engage counterparts, because when a president travels on this trip, he actually goes with the team of people that will engage in those kind of conversation and try to have memorandum of understanding, try to be able to establish some kind of agreement that will allow for implementation subsequently after the summit is over. So I believe that Brazil is big with agriculture. I believe that Nigeria is in a position where we can tap from their experience and improve our systems here. I believe that, policies that has to deal with, people at the lower echelon, dealing with, creating a safety net for the poorest of the poor, where we have issues with implementation, this kind of, engagement allows us to be able to also share experiences, have the conversation with, with countries that seem to be implementing the same policies, and if they are doing it very well, come on, there is always an opportunity to improve to improve what we have locally. So I think that this conversation is a very good one, and I believe that as time goes on, there's never an end. 365 days from today, there will be another G20 meeting. But what is important is that Nigeria is participating at that level, and our voices are being heard. And it also shows recognition of the fact that, the leaders, the world leaders, the biggest economies of the world are recognizing the influence of Nigeria as well. So that in itself is also very good, because once we participate in these meetings, it means that we can always be part of alliances like this. We will always also be part of the beneficiaries that will get the dividends of whatever the outcome of these alliances and the likes of this kind of agreements are coming into play. So I think that we're moving in the right direction. We are already on the table, so conversations will continue to go on even after.
Ambassador, still about zero hunger and poverty eradication. I want us to talk about it extensively, because there have been arguments over whether or not the president can directly reach the vulnerable without going through the governors. In other clients, cash benefits are directly transferred to recipients, thus bypassing the state governments. And the goal is ensuring the benefits reach intended beneficiaries. Stakeholders here in Nigeria say the president must stop giving out handouts. But what is the place of comprehensive data?
You have raised a very important issue, concerning how the federal government can actually reach, the possibility of federal government being able to reach down to these people without going through the governors. It's actually, an argument and a conversation that we have to elevate. We must find, as a country, irrespective of our party, party alliances or whatever, we find at the political level, irrespective of those political divides. This is a country where we believe that, a lot of the citizens are poor and a lot of the citizens are hungry. So whatever it takes, for crying out loud, it's the federal government is there, but it's also difficult for federal government to function without the state governments. The state governments are actually, they have the capacity to reach to more people. They understand, because there's a federal government, there's a state government, and there's also the local governments. And then under the local government, we also have the ward systems. And I believe that every energy must be focused in ensuring that there is improved cooperation amongst the three tiers of government that we have in Nigeria. And to that extent, federal government can play its role, but implementation must lie with those at the lower end. The state governments and the local governments must be very, very important in this implementation. And that's why we are happy with what is going on with the local government autonomy. There are, of course, issues that are arising from that as a result of, a few governors thinking differently. But whatever be the case, This time has come for there to be improved cooperation. Time have come for the state government to actually do a lot more in trying to ensure that whatever comes from federal government is cascaded down to the people that actually need it. Remember, there are responsibilities, and even when we share revenues from the federation accounts, these revenues are shared between the 3 tiers of government. It also means that everybody have got their responsibilities. So all hands must be on deck as a nation to ensure that we deliver the dividends of democracy to the people. Governance is about protecting lives and properties. Governance is about making the lives of people better. And this is not a sole responsibility of just the federal government. The state governments are responsible, the local governments are responsible. So what we need to do is to call for inclusion, call for cooperation, improved collaboration at every level to ensure that we collectively deliver the dividends of good governance and democracy to the people. This is the reason why people are elected into offices, irrespective of the platform that they get there. Once you get there, the responsibility is no more political. It is now about governance. It's now about delivering the dividends of democracy to the people. And I am quite sure that as time goes on, we are finding better ways of doing the things. You know, when this register came up first, there were lots of issues with it. At the moment, they keep getting cleaned up, and there will never be a time that we will say that it is Uhuru yet, But I think that the time we are in at the moment calls for improved cooperation and collaboration amongst all the stakeholders to ensure that we address the issue of hunger, to ensure that we reduce poverty, because that is why political office holders are elected, and all hands must be on deck to ensure that we do this.
Right. Ambassador, let's talk about education, because Mr. President also stressed his commitment to education, which he described as critical if the country must be free from poverty and hunger. And with the new Minister for Education, and that's Tuji Alausa, how do you evaluate some recent policy shifts, like scrapping his predecessor's policy of the 18-year benchmark for students seeking admission to higher education institutions? He also said the country's education system will shift to an 80% practical and 20% theoretical model.
No, there's no doubt our educational policy at the national level and even at the state and local government level needs a lot of reform. Because if you even look at the composition of the population, if you look at the demographics of the country, you find out that we are at a point where we need to de-emphasize a lot of theoretical issues that we learn. We need to get practical right now. We need to do a lot of things that will help our industries. And the policies is such that we have to find a way to create a handshake, between the employers of labor and the school, because we must train our children for the jobs for tomorrow and not the jobs for yesterday. Today we are discussing artificial intelligence. Today we are discussing a lot of issues that has to do with renewable energy. How can we still be talking about the things and technologies of yesterday when the world is moving in with the speed of light? So clearly, the issue of 18 years, policy, students must get to, I thought it wasn't even an issue that we needed to pay attention to, because for me, what's the point, actually, But however, whatever be the case, we need to look at our curriculum. We need to ensure that what we are teaching our children are the things that will be relevant for the industries of tomorrow. We need to ensure that whatever we are teaching our children are not the things that they will study and cram, and then they come out and they are unable to find where to practicalize some of the things that they've learned in school. So clearly, I listened to the president's speech. He talked about the fact that we need to focus on education, we need to focus on health, we need to focus on access to cheaper financing for the kind of population that we have. So clearly, I am of a view that reforming our educational system is long overdue, and we need to begin to do that like yesterday. Quite a lot of states are also doing their bits. If you go to Anambra, for example, the governor has done a lot by employing a lot more teachers, because a school or education is as good as the quality of teachers that you have that are teaching. If you don't find good quality teachers, already your education is compromised. And then another thing is the curriculum. What kind of curriculum do we maintain? How do we make our curriculum to be functional in such a way that people can leave school and find ways to begin to practice what they have learned in school than waiting to be employed in some white-collar job, which was available in 1960 and no longer available now. How many people can join civil service in Nigeria? How many people can join the organized private sector? What this means is that our education system must recognize the fact that the way to go is entrepreneurship. Our education system must recognize the fact that small and medium-scale enterprises is the way forward for a population, a young population like that of Nigeria. Our education system must recognize that tech and entertainment is the way to go. Look at the economy that is created around entertainment in Nigeria, for example. How come we are not, it is not entertainment and how to produce music and movies are not part of our curriculum yet in the school, even from primary school? How come issues relating to tech and some of these artificial intelligence issues are not getting the kind of attention that they deserve at this particular point in time? So we are talking about tomorrow. We are talking about us surviving in a world that is moving with the speed of lightning. So clearly, we must pay attention at, looking at how we can improve our education system so that the people that are coming out of this system are not just being useful to themselves, they are being useful to the society, improving the economy and employing people, not just looking for where to find employment. Right. So this point was made by the president in his presentation. And I believe that what the new Minister of Education is doing is in the right direction. But this has to happen as quickly as possible. It is long overdue. A lot of work needs to happen at that level. And I am in full support of the reform in that sector.
Mr. President also talked about the ongoing tax reforms. Maybe I should quote him. He says, we are engaging stakeholders and sensitizing Nigerians to expand the economy's tax base for inclusive developmental growth. We're doing this without necessarily increasing the taxes on our people who have already given a lot, end of quote. Ambassador, from the kinds of reactions this tax reform bills have generated, are you surprised? Because listening to Mr. Taiwo Yedele, who is the chairman Presidential Committee on Fiscal Policy and Tax Reforms, expected that many should be happy with these reforms. But we have the northern stakeholders rejecting these initiatives. What's your take?
Well, my take is very simple. Policies of government, you have to find a way to communicate with the people. Governance is about engagement. You must engage with the people. Whatever issues there are, I've had the 19 Northern State governors, I've had the Northern Elders Forum, I've had quite a lot of even the senators at the National Assembly speak, against the fact that this has to, that the bill should be stepped down. But clearly, the point is that we, irrespective of the, of the resistance, I think that, we need to spend time engaging and studying this bill to understand what they are all about. The president says that this tax reform bill is about widening the tax net as against increasing the taxes that are being paid by the people. So I think that a lot of engagement, and so is I can see the chairman of the tax reform committee doing a lot of work, engaging the people and discussing these things. But a lot more work needs to be done at that level. Quite the northern governors have talked about the fact that they didn't want it. Elders Forum from the north talked about the fact that it should be stepped down. But I think that we need to have people that are championing this, particularly from Presidential Task Force Committee, to engage. Move around the states of federation, move around the regions of the federation. Try to explain the advantages this have got over the disadvantages. Luckily, the president now have an essay on, that will need to be speaking for him on policy issues and the reform. So I expect a lot more engagement in that regard. I expect, a much more robust conversation to be had at every level, stakeholders engagement, stakeholders management, so that we can get them to understand, because I'm quite confident that whatever the resistance is, that the bill is having at this point in time, if the people are made to understand that this will benefit them, and the only way we can do that is to engage them more. If we can convince them that this is going to be to your benefit in the long run, I don't think that they will have issues with it. There must be some misconception somewhere, usually happens in Nigeria as to, what they don't understand about the bill or, But what I believe that has to happen at this point in time is more improved engagement with the people. And then I believe that once they can find the advantages, that this bill brings forth to the country, because I like the fact that The bill, the president has made it very clear, we need to widen our tax net. We need to find a way to get more people that are not paying to come into the net. And that way,
Ambassador, because I was going to say
that
that
is coming into the system.
Part of the takeaways from that summit is that President Lula is hinting a 2% tax on the world's billionaires. So this means taxing the super rich. Are we doing enough of that here?
No, we are not. We are not doing enough of that here, taxing the super rich. I'm not. This is an issue that I believe that the FIRS is in a better position to address. But even taking this matter from the local context and bringing it to the conversation that happened at the G20 meeting, there was a lot of conversation around reforming the global tax systems and finding ways to ensure that we bridge the gap between the global south and the global north. This conversation is about, how do we reform even the global tax system? So these are part of a conversation that is being held, or rather that took place at the G20 meeting. But the point I'm trying to make is that there will always be resistance to every policy of government. We had that with subsidy over and over and over again before we had a president that had the courage to be able to remove subsidy. There will always be resistance to issues of forex. Why would we have 2 or 3 and all of these things? They will always come at a cost. So the same thing with the tax bill. So what needs to happen is that we need increased engagement, because we need the National Assembly to pass the bill the moment it gets there. You don't need to present a bill to the National Assembly and then it's not passed, and then it's argued over and over again. So the time is ripe, and I think that those responsible that are championing this have got all the time in the world to move around and convince the people to speak more on it, to pull out all of the perks and all the advantages that this the reform brings to the people. Because at the end of the day, if the governors know that they will end up with more money at the end of the day, if the local government chairmen know that they will end up with more money at the end of the day once the tax bill is passed, all of these funds, when they put together, will help them in driving reducing hunger and poverty at their localities. All of this will help in improving infrastructure, both at the national and at the subnational level. So we need to have that conversation. And the
Ambassador, perhaps this answers my next question as well, because in what looked like a commendation, we had Kristalina Georgieva, who is the managing director of IMF, commending Mr. President's economic reforms and their positive indicators. She specifically lauded the social investment programs as a way of cushioning the effect on the most vulnerable, and also promised the assistance of the body in this regard. If we have the international communities lauding Mr. President's policies and most of his reforms, why is it hard for Nigerians to understand? Is it communication issue?
Well, it's not hard for Nigerians to understand. The problem is that we must recognize that people are hungry. I think this point has to be made over and over again. When people complain, you can't force understanding on a hungry person. And I think it's important that we understand that. That would be very much insensitivity. But I think the point is that we must explain to the people that you are hungry today, and then this is the this is the pathway out of that hunger. I think that's the point that needs to be made. Yes, we are here today, unintended consequences of the reforms, but we needed to make these reforms to be able to move forward. Because if we didn't make these reforms, we are likely to end up in a position where we can no longer move forward. So we will still be back to ground zero. I listened to the coordinating minister of the economy a couple of days ago talk about the fact that Nigeria had saved about $20 billion as a result of the subsidy and the reform of the exchange rate policies. This point needs to be made, and people will also need to begin to see what is going on, or whatever safety measures that we are putting in place, whatever measures we are putting in place to cushion the impact of this. And that's the issue, and that's the point where we need to press harder. Let people begin to feel it, because if people can feel that the price of food is coming down in the market, food inflation is a major issue, people can feel that the transportation cost is reducing, I believe that they will understand. But I wonder what the only language a hungry man understands is food. And as far as I'm concerned, government is doing a lot, and that's why even engagement at this level and how Nigeria's participation can help ensure that we have food security in the country has become germane at this particular point in time. So the engagement is good, but the communication has to be there. And beyond the communication is also for the people to begin to feel that impact. Because if you don't feel the impact, then clearly whatever we are trying to communicate may not make sense to a hungry person. So I agree with the fact that Nigerians are having difficulty in understanding it, but certain things happen with time. And I believe that some of these reforms that we've entered, the dividends will begin to show. The NBS just released...
All right, Ambassador, it's a good place to leave the conversation tonight. It's a good place to leave the conversation tonight. Thank you so much. I've been speaking with Ambassador Elijah Onyeagba, former Nigerian ambassador to Burundi, as we discuss key takeaways from G20 Summit and what it means for Nigeria and the continent. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much for watching, everyone. That marks the end of today's episode of Politics Tonight. But you can watch the repeat broadcast of this episode at midnight. Get in touch with us on our social media handles, Facebook, Instagram, and X at TVC News NG and at Olajumoke using the hashtag Politics Tonight. We're also on YouTube at youtube.com/TVC News Nigeria. I am Olajumoke Olatunji. Good night, everyone.